kilometers of the border with Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't NATO who put little green men inside Ukraine to destabilize eastern cities.
I'm pretty sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So unless that's changed.
It's not changed. But I'm pretty sure the movement by Russia is Russia's decision.
If NATO is moved east, the reason that the Russian army is closer or on NATO's doorstep is because NATO moved.
NATO is not an anti-Russia alliance. NATO is a security alliance.
Unfortunately, for 50 years, it was an anti-Soviet alliance. So do you not understand it? Do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians would perceive it as a threat? And the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border while their troops, I mean, the places where their troops are, you say their troops are, and may have been in Ukraine and Georgia, are not NATO members.
I'm not going to pretend to know what goes in President Putin's mind or Russian military commanders. I mean, I barely got a history degree at the University of South Florida. Right. What I can tell you is that NATO is a defensive alliance. It remains a defensive alliance.
Fair enough, but it has moved east, correct? I mean, that's just a fact.
It has expanded, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
But there's no reason for anybody to think the expansion is a hostile or threatening move. And we've been saying that throughout the last 15 years, man.
It's like you're moving closer to Russia. You're blaming the Russians for being close to NATO.
No.
That's exactly what Hegel said.
We're blaming the Russians for violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine and destabilizing the security situation inside Europe.
Which is not a NATO.
I see
other countries.
This is an essential clip. This is profound. An admiral, main propagandist, doesn't know history. Of course they do. War is all about knowing history, knowing about groups and organizations. And they've been trying to overthrow the Russian government and others. And they overthrew the Ukrainian government. So the West started this. 80% of Americans are against the war. Let's stop the damn thing now. Let's impeach Biden. Let's come back to sanity now. Stop World War III now. Now.
Rallying patriots worldwide in defense of human liberty. It's Alex Jones.
InfoWars. Tomorrow's news today.
Thousands of former Nazis went to work for the United States government.
A flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
Here is a bulletin from CBS News. President Kennedy has been shot.
This is a different kind of war.
The USS Liberty had just been attacked by Israeli jets and torpedo boats.
The CIA could manipulate the news in the United States.
They took the babies out of incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
It was almost as if it were a plan in motion. It just pancaked.
We need to go into the Capitol.
You will always have conspiracy theories. They are nothing but distractions.
You guys censored Harvard-educated doctors. You silenced those voices.
What we want to do in Davos is push the reset button.
As soon as we start exposing the Great Reset, the sooner these globalists start going to prison.
This is an emergency broadcast, Tuesday, February 21st, 2023. As we speak in a fascistic nighttime outdoor speech, Biden is basically declaring war on Russia publicly and pledging absolute military commitment. Putin is saying, threatening that nuclear war is imminent. This is getting more insane by the minute. So incredibly dangerous. I really don't have words at this point to describe how this spiraling, this death spiral threatens us all. I don't think you need me to explain that to you. The key word here is obviously escalation. And if people think the train derailment and the toxic black plumes of smoke are bad in Ohio, and they certainly are not a good thing, it's nothing compared to what a nuclear war does, turning every city and every town into a smoking, toxic ruin. The nuclear reactors, there's over 460 of them, will meltdown, hundreds of Chernobyls. It'll be the end of civilization and the end of most life on Earth as we know it, and we are seconds away on the doomsday clock. And all of it because George Soros, Zbigniew Brzezinski, and the Rockefellers and the Rothschild crime axis wants global domination. So our plate, ladies and gentlemen, is extremely full today. We also have Mike Adams in studio with us for 2 hours. He's got two big guests joining us in the third and fourth hour on massive issues. And I'm just going to try to calmly go over all this as best I can. But this is madness. Here's the most important thing to know. For 9 years, the West has been overthrowing governments in Ukraine and moving weapons in and attacking Russian towns that are majority 99% Russian in the east. Putin bit on the bait and went in. Terrible decision. Absolutely horrible. And now the New World Order has its global crisis to bring in its cashless society enslavement grid. On the course we're on right now, there is a 100% chance nuclear weapons are going to be used, and in almost every actuary or war profile war game that's been done, if tacticals get used, you've got about an 80% chance it'll lead to a wider nuclear war. And when you look at the numbers of a wider nuclear war, it's about 100% chance it'll lead to total commitment. That means just spasm of mass death. So, we're a pretty satanic, evil planet, aren't we? And it goes to say we just blow ourselves up. Real good chance, ladies and gentlemen, that we're facing the end of the world. Hope everybody enjoys it. We'll be right back. It is 11:05, now 11:06 Central Standard Time. Coming to you from deep in the heart of Texas, broadcasting worldwide, I'm the Alex Jones, host of the Alex Jones Show. And I am pretty much having trouble talking at this point because of what I saw about 10 minutes ago when I was getting myself a cup of coffee, and we've got Fox News on in there, and I knew his speech was coming up, but he'd just begun it, and that was Joe Biden in Warsaw, Poland, basically declaring war on Russia in a massive provocation, going to the Russian borders and standing up there on a stage with the defense minister and the puppet president Zelensky, who just yesterday called for invading Russia and sending tanks into Moscow. China is now moving into a position to give military aid to Russia, and Zelensky has said that will cause World War III. Let me say something here real calmly but real succinctly. We are in World War III. There isn't a top analyst that doesn't agree with that statement. Putin's next big offensive has already begun. And the archetypal image of hundreds and hundreds of German tanks pouring in up to the Russian border is exactly how you punch the Russians' buttons when the Germans killed over 20 million Russians in World War II. That was close to a third of the Russian population gone. Now, the Russians gave back as good as they got. It's estimated of the 22 million Germans that died, 15 million were killed by the Russians. 15 million dead people with conventional weapons. Now, I want to make a statement here for those that don't study war escalation and war games and war doctrine. But we are following the exact Pentagon Rand Corporation projection of how this would go to a T. And we have to blame the deep state, Rothschild, Rockefeller, Soros axis that brags they started this war 9 years ago and have finally poked the bear into a confrontation. But in this confrontation, the matador is the New World Order deep state. The bull is Russia. But in this game, when the matador sticks his sword into the heart of the bull explodes and blows up everyone in the stadium. The only way to win is not to play this game. And here's the most important fact. If the globalists running our country would have said, let's have a potentially world-ending event, there would have been massive demonstrations and massive political pressure, and this would have been stopped. In fact, depending on the national poll, they run about 75 to 87%. Most polls are mid-80s, but even the pro-war pollsters that skew things are in the mid-70s. So let's be conservative. 75% of the people in this country are smart enough to know we don't want to be in a big war on Russia's border with nuclear weapons laying around everywhere. And nuclear reactors all over the place, like Chernobyl, right there in Ukraine. Now, on the path we're on, it's kind of like you're in a car driving down the highway with the family. You take them for spring break to the Grand Canyon, and you're in a van, and you're driving along, and you see the edge of the Grand Canyon right there, and there's no barriers in many areas. You can just drive right off if you want to, and you just turn the car, and you're about 50 yards from the edge of the cliff, and you're driving about 20 miles an hour, and your wife looks at you and says, Bob, or David, or Sanchez, or whatever your name is, you might not want to run off the edge of the cliff. You're like, it's okay, honey. I've got time to turn the wheel back to the road here on the edge of the Grand Canyon, driving along the pretty pine trees. And then about 10 seconds later, she goes, honey, you're now just 50 yards. We're going to go over the edge of the cliff in about 2 seconds. Oh, no. I'm in control. And then you're going 20 miles an hour still, and now you're about 10 feet. You slam the brakes on, you can't stop the car at that point. And we're almost to the point where you can't stop the car. I had to have a discussion with my wife this morning about leaving the United States for the Southern Hemisphere. And I'm going to be completely honest with all of you. I've said I'll never surrender. I won't back down from the deep state here. If things can be fixed in America. But America is so far gone, as we can all see, that I am strongly having to consider evacuating the United States. Still, it'll be hell if we're in Argentina or someplace during a nuclear war. There'll be a nuclear winter, and it'll be bad. And I know a lot of billionaires and people that have already fled to places like New Zealand and Hawaii. I don't have the money for bunkers and all the rest of it. In fact, I'd have to, live in a shack on the side of a mountain or something. I'm basically completely out of money. You see the headlines, Jones gets $100,000 a month in his bankruptcy. How's he get that? My legal bills are over $100,000 a month. That's the point. I'm out of money. I'm holding off the whole globalist onslaught. But people say, how are you taking that? That's nothing compared to the fact that we are being driven over the edge of a cliff right now. There's not much time to turn the damn wheel. And look, if all the bureaucrats and all the trendies and all the talk show hosts and all the people at their New York cocktail parties and their Los Angeles cocktail parties really think you're immune because Russia's 10,000 miles away or 8,000 miles away, if you're in New York, if you're in Alaska, it's 20 miles away. You may feel like you're immune from this, but there are Russian submarines off our coast in the Atlantic and the Pacific and in the Gulf of Mexico that could destroy every U.S. city in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Mach 9 missiles that cannot be shot down. 5 minutes. Chicago, New York, Austin, L.A., Miami, Tampa, Seattle, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Detroit, Houston, Atlanta. Gone, 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 gone. The ICBMs can be here in 12 to 15 minutes. And we're dealing with the Russians that lost 22 million people in World War II. And they're ready for nuclear war. And Putin gave a speech on that yesterday. By the way, can you imagine if Putin was in Toronto with a coalition of more than 20 nations and hundreds of thousands of troops and weapons saying he was going to take over? What would we do? That evil pedophile puppet, Joe Biden, was in Kiev yesterday, and he's in Warsaw right now giving a Hitlerian nighttime speech about war and escalated war with Russia. I'm not going to evacuate, but I'm being honest, and I'm having to have discussions about it with my wife. It's that serious, folks. You should know that. Biden is still bumbling and stumbling in a nighttime fascistic speech in Warsaw, Poland, on the border with Russia, rattling the nuclear sabers. As soon as we get a transcript of it, we'll read excerpts of it. He pledged whatever it takes to defeat Russia. This is the unstoppable force, comes into contact with the immovable object. I have Putin's 8-page speech here, and I have clips of it that have English overdubs. We're going to be playing some clips. But I really think this speech is so important that I'm going to read it in its entirety at the start of the next hour. And then we'll also play excerpts of Biden. Maybe we'll play the whole thing. But I've studied the whole globalist attack profile. They need a cover to bring down civilization, and then its ashes build their transhuman hell. And they told you soon you'll own nothing and be happy because you'll be dead. Soon there'll be no more cities, only communes, as the UN art display I videotaped a year and a half ago in New York showed. And it showed blown out bunkers saying, soon you'll live here. In fact, I mention that all the time. Will you guys go ask Drew to pull that up? He was the camera guy there. I forget the name of the report. And it's just so chilling. You know, it's just the one in New York. I want that clip. Get it. Thanks. And you say, why is it so dystopian? You're going to eat bugs. Soon we'll save the earth. There won't be as many people because they've hit us with a bioweapon. They've hit us with a poison shot. They're dissolving our borders. They're destroying our currencies. They're starting World War III. These people are psychotics. They want to create a crisis so horrible that they're able to carry out their nightmare aims, because after a nuclear war, the survivors aren't going to be able to organize very well, and the globalists have got all these underground bases and plan to emerge after this. But if you look at the numbers, the 400 plus nuclear reactors, most of them in the U.S. and Europe, will melt down. They'll be the equivalent of millions of toxic waste fires like we're seeing in Ohio. Anarchy will break out in areas where populations aren't destroyed. The third world will descend into total conflict and war. There'll be at least a 5-year mini ice age with crops failing and being poisoned by radioactivity, radioactive isotopes. It's just unfathomable. And on the current path we're on, %80 chance total nuclear war within a year, probably sooner. And I guess I'll just stay at my post here, right here in the main nuke zone with Fort Hood down the street, and just let them kill me and my whole family. But I'm really having to control myself, not just packing up and leaving right now, and still do the show from another country, and I guess the crew can sit here in the nuclear fallout zone, wait for the nukes to rain down on top of them. But do I really want to be in one of the safer third world countries, which are so dangerous already? No. The only place that would be safe is some of the islands in the South Pacific that are populated by small European populations that produce wool. There's 5 or 6 islands that have populations of only a few hundred to a few thousand. You could get to one of those islands, you might do okay. The globalists, I don't know why they build their bases in Kauai, Hawaii. That's the main nuke base in the Pacific. It's got the anti-missile defense system there, the most advanced, but that's not going to stop Russian cruise missiles fired by submarines or Chinese cruise missiles. Are they going to be safe in Tasmania, Australia? Are they going to be safe in New Zealand? No. Why are they doing this? Because they are demonically inspired and controlled. That's why. Let me play a clip of Kirby, who's normally the deputy press secretary. He's really an admiral. But now that we're in World War III land, he's strutting around in his admiral outfit, and he's asked by the Associated Press in his little fancy clown outfit, well, why are we on the border with Russia? And he bumbles around, doesn't know what to do. Because the same George Soros buying off all the politicians and the district attorneys and defunding the police, the same George Soros doing that. I played a clip last year where he said, I am really the czar of Russia now. I will run Russia. I mean, this is just insanity. Here's Kirby with the Associated Press reporter who deserves credit. Journalist Matt Lee destroys John Kirby. Here it is.
To look at this and say the reason that the Russian army is on NATO, the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is because NATO has expanded rather than the Russians expanding. That, in other words, NATO has moved closer to Russia rather than Russia moving closer to NATO. Is that not an accurate way to look at this?
I think that's the way President Putin probably looks at it. It's certainly not the way that we look at it.
You don't think that NATO has expanded eastward toward Russia?
NATO has expanded,
okay.
and the expansion has been a good thing for...
So the reason that the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is not the fault of the Russian army, it's not the Russian army that's done it. It's NATO has moved closer to move
I'm pretty
east.
sure it wasn't NATO who was ordering, upwards of 15 battalion tactical groups to within 10 kilometers of the border with Ukraine. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't NATO who put little green men inside Ukraine to destabilize eastern cities.
I'm pretty sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So unless that's changed.
It's not changed. But I'm pretty sure the movement by Russia is Russia's decision.
If NATO has moved east, the reason that the Russian army is closer or on NATO's doorstep is because NATO moved.
NATO is not an anti-Russia alliance. NATO is a security alliance.
For 50 years, it was an anti-Soviet alliance. So do you not understand it? So do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians will perceive it as a threat? And the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border while their troops, I mean, the places where their troops are, you say their troops are, and may have been in Ukraine and Georgia, are not NATO members.
I'm not going to pretend to know what goes in President Putin's mind or Russian military commanders. I mean, I barely got a history degree at the University of South Florida. Right. What I can tell you is that NATO is a defensive alliance. It remains a defensive alliance.
Fair enough, but it has moved east, correct? I mean, that's just a fact.
It has expanded, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
But there's no reason for anybody to think the expansion is a hostile or threatening move. And we've been saying that throughout the last 15 years, man.
It's like you're moving closer to Russia. You're blaming the Russians for being close to NATO.
No.
That's exactly what Hegel
We're
said.
blaming the Russians for violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine and destabilizing the security situation inside Europe.
Which is not a NATO.
I see
Other countries.
This is an essential clip. This is profound. An admiral, main propagandist, doesn't know history. Of course they do. War is all about knowing history, knowing about groups and organizations. And they've been trying to overthrow the Russian government and others. And they overthrew the Ukrainian government. So the West started this. 80% of Americans are against the war. Let's stop the damn thing now. Let's impeach Biden. Let's come back to sanity now. Stop World War III now. Now. If you're receiving this transmission, you're on planet Earth under the threat of nuclear war. Well, so many Americans like to watch war on television, both fictional and real. It's a blood sport like gladiators in an arena. But in a nuclear war, my friends, you are all in the arena, including our children. Well, Biden's concluded his speech, his nighttime speech in Poland, in Warsaw. Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, Biden tells crowds. An attack against one is an attack against us all, even though Ukraine's been part of Russia forever. He says, it's a sacred oath. He said the U.S. is a solid rock commitment to NATO, even though Ukraine's not in NATO. Biden speaks in Poland after a surprise trip to Ukraine. Kiev stands strong. Fresh from Kiev, Biden rallies NATO allies in Poland. Biden delivers remarks in Warsaw, Poland after making a surprise trip to Ukraine. Just days from the anniversary of Putin launching the invasion. Biden said Kiev stands strong year after Russia's forces invaded Ukraine. I want to play some little bit of the beginning of his speech, and I want to play some clips from Putin and go over this news. But Ohio train derailment is emblematic of our rotting infrastructure and how the elites don't care about us, and we're all basically in the same boat as the poor folks in Palestine, Ohio, just like you're in the same boat if you're in Palestine in East Texas, where my family's from. That's the biggest town from where my family's from on my dad's side in East Texas, Palestine, Texas. Doesn't matter where you are in the United States or in the world, we're all in the crosshairs of this nightmare. But that profound clip, AP journalist Matt Lee destroys John Kirby, should be seen by all Americans, because you could teach a college course on gaslighting off that 2.5-minute clip. Kirby's asked about history and says, I don't care about history. I don't know.